live.
All right, we're live.
So this is Senate Appropriations, and we're continuing our budget on military, and we have General Knight here and Deputy Adjutant General Bragg, and your financial manager, Kim, is with you as well. So welcome, all three of you. I don't know how you want to proceed with your budget presentation, but this committee, I know we've got a lot of information here, but would like to just have you go over the highlights of the budget and any other issues that you might want to bring to our attention. I see you've given us a package here that outlines your accomplishments for last year, and so that's always nice for us to get, including we like photographs. So so I will let you take it from here, General Knight.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, what I'd like to do, I'll hit the high points, probably reinforce some of those accomplishments of your National Guard in the past year. And of note to the committee, made it a point since I've been in office, every 6 months I send out a legislative update. Understanding how busy everybody is, we've tried to make it a little more user-friendly with the 2-page executive summary, complete with hyperlinks, and then an additional 9 pages of additional detail, facts, percentages, and other items that may be of interest to our legislators. So as you know, we had 33 years of excellence in flying the F-16. And a year ago, December, we transitioned to operational status with the F-35. Given events in Ukraine, we received a request not 30 days after completing that conversion, or 90 days within completing the conversion, to deploy in support of the ongoing NATO air policing missions in Europe. It was not even 30 days later that our fighter wing was able to execute that mission, taking 8 aircraft, about 250 members of our Air Guard to Spangdahlem Air Base in Germany. And over the course of that deployment, they flew more than 450 sorties, totaling more than 2,000 flying hours. It's important to note here is they did many of these missions in conjunction and in partnership with our NATO allies. And in fact, we're exemplifying what we call agile combat employment with our airmen, taking a significantly fewer number of Air Guard members, maintainers, crew chiefs, fuelers on those expeditionary missions, for instance, to the Baltic states. That exemplifies to me the efficiency and professionalism of our Air Guard, that we can do it more effectively and for less money and with fewer people and resources than our active duty counterparts, speaks to their expertise. Some of the excellence that goes on in our Air Guard is exemplified, as noted, receipt of the 158th Civil Engineer Squadron of the William Denneke Outstanding Civil Engineer Unit Award and the Senior Master Sergeant Gerald Stryzak Award. Denneke Award is to the top Air National Guard Civil Engineer Unit based on installation of expeditionary engineering, which is what our engineers do. And then the Stryzak Award is for the best Air Force Civil Engineer Explosive Ordnance Disposal Flight. And that, I believe, is across the entirety of the Air Force. And our Wing Public Affairs team also received acknowledgement for innovation for their photo and video products that documented the aforementioned deployment and the round-robin low approaches to reassure our allies in Europe. Of note here, the Vermont Air National Guard Fire Department is the primary fire and emergency response unit at Burlington International Airport. Last year, not only did they respond to any incidents on the airfield, they also provide fire and emergency response to neighboring communities more than 244 times last year. So it's on and off base. So significant contribution to that airport, and we do that at no cost to the city of Burlington. By transition to the Army Guard, last year was very busy for deployments. So we deployed over 1,000 soldiers. We welcomed them back home this past spring from 3 separate mobilizations to Europe, Africa, and to the Middle East. And they conducted security and stability operations across 7 countries in nearly a year-long deployment. For the folks in Central Command, they worked at 7 or 8 very austere sites throughout the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, and United Arab Emirates. And that photo that you referred to, ma'am, that was the last flight out of Kabul International Airport. And the soldiers you see seated in the front of that plane are Vermont soldiers. They're with our 86th Infantry Brigade combat team.
My question was, what happens if you have to go to the bathroom?
Yes, ma'am. Good question.
It's like, oh boy, you're really packed in there.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. They do have facilities. They're not very private.
I'm sure that.
What, General, what aircraft is that? That you're in?
That's a C-17, sir.
August 27th, 2021, the Mountain Division. Is that the Fear the Deer?
What was it?
Something with the deer.
Oh, yes, ma'am. The Stag's Head, that's our 86th Infantry Brigade combat team.
Yeah, Fear the Deer.
Fear the deer. And you notice the deer doesn't have an eye on it, I don't think, so we call it the no eye deer.
Oh.
We fix that. So they just did remarkable work for us, ma'am. And as a follow-on to that, as the committee knows, we have 3 state partnerships. I'll talk a little bit more about that. We've been with North Macedonia 30 years this spring, with Senegal 15 years. I'll be there in a couple of weeks to celebrate their Independence Day with them on April 4th. And May also marks 1 year of our signing ceremony with the Republic of Austria. Important here, again, working with our NATO allies, especially as North Macedonia being our newest NATO ally, we participated last year in Swift Response 22. That was a NATO level exercise involving certainly our host nation of North Macedonia, Britain, Italy, Montenegro, and France, and I believe Spain was also there, and certainly our contingent. And the focus was interoperability, and we exemplified that with North Macedonia. That's been a very key element of their NATO partnership as they hit their gates to become full contributing members of NATO. We've also got ongoing deployments now. We deployed in February. They're currently at Fort Hood for sustainment training. Our medical evacuation unit, our Black Hawk helicopters, 65 soldiers and 8 of their aircraft are heading to Central Command. They will be working again out of 8 austere sites as they did about 4 years ago. They're a very in-demand unit. I would go back to their previous deployment 4 years ago. I had just gotten elected to this position. They flew over 250 medical evacuation missions in a year. And what's important here is they did not drop a single mission. In the aviation community, certainly rotary wing, that's almost unheard of. So credit to the maintainers, the aircrew, and the pilots that made that happen. And our civil support team, at some point, we'll get on the calendar for another legislator day to visit the civil support team. Those are our full-time members, chemical, biological, radiological. They are in the top 20% of teams nationally in operational tempo, so they're very much in demand. They don't just do work here in Vermont. They work across the United States in partnership with other civil support teams and Army North. And they also work with our partner countries, specifically with Senegal and North Macedonia in support of the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, doing evaluations and training for both Senegalese and North Macedonian weapons of mass destruction teams. That's very well received. Just a few weeks ago, I went to visit our $30 million Army Mountain Warfare School. We retain the official status as being the Mountain Warfare School Center for the United States Army. So we're the executive agent. We hosted 13 National Association of Military Mountaineering Schools. We've been a part of that since 1983, and that was a key factor in our selection for partnership with Austria. So that's how long our relationship goes back with them. This past September 11th, we had the first ever joint Vermont National Guard open house. That exceeded expectations wildly. I would have been happy to have 1,500 to 2,000 people there. We had more than 6,000 folks attend, and that's something we'll try to do every other year. It was a significant undertaking. But it was a great opportunity for us to kind of highlight that the Vermont National Guard is not Area 51. People can actually come and visit us and talk about what it is that we do and why.
General, go back to the first.
And as mentioned, we've become
General, the bullet before the September 11th about your integrated primary team. Seems like that's a particularly important initiative relative to some of the past problems that, the guards have had to address. And so I wondered if you could speak a little bit as to the experience from putting together that team. It's under joint, it's the first bullet. It says within the service member support directorate, you initiated the implementation of a integrated primary prevention team to assist with
yes, ma'am. So
suicide.
yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
I got it.
I just wondered if you could speak to your experience to date.
So about 18 months ago, I was asked to participate in the, yes, ma'am. So about 18 months ago, I was asked to participate at the national level with Guard Bureau on the General Officer Steering Committee, providing supervision and guidance to a sexual harassment, sexual assault prevention task force. This undertaking is a complete revision of the National Guard's approach and how we handle those issues. So we've got the published policy now. We're putting those things in place. What's key to that is, in my view, what we established here was the J9. Every staff section has that type of acronym. So it's a service member support directorate, and we've got elements here that handle sexual harassment, sexual assault, victim advocacy, suicide prevention, resiliency, family programs. All of those fall under different staff sections here. State equal employment management, equal opportunity. That doesn't make sense to me and a number of other adjutants general. Those, in our view, should be housed under a separate directorate with a direct line to the adjutant general, given their importance within the organization. So that's the direction we're going. We're going to continue to build that and get that fielded. Anticipate having at least a lieutenant colonel as the officer in charge, perhaps a master sergeant as the non-commissioned officer in charge, but in any case, they have a direct link to the adjutant general. What was important in that conversation with developing policy at the national level, and I believe I was the only adjutant general to speak with the DoD Interim Review Commission. From that came a violence prevention workforce. That's not something we've ever had before. We're really good at response. We'll keep doing that. We needed to focus more on prevention. So as a result of that, Vermont became one of the first states to receive a violence prevention workforce. These are full-time Title V civilians who specialize in violence prevention. So we have full-time resources now. I've got a GS-13 as a supervisor of that team, 2 GS-12s and 2 GS-11s. And we're in the process. We've already hired an attorney advisor with a focus on working with that team. We're kind of forced into the role of doing not only response, but having to educate and train on prevention. Wasn't fair to them, wasn't fair to the Guard, and it really didn't give us a product we were looking for. In the end, we want to focus on prevention while keeping up our efforts in response, but we need to reduce the...
No, I keep worrying we're gonna, are they frozen?
...incident of it, should they happen.
Should I tell them? I'm gonna suggest you shut off your video because you're
Unstable.
Unstable, I hate to use the term, but you're cutting in and out.
Okay.
Oh, what?
Unstable, it's not the first time I've heard that, ma'am.
I was referring to the connection.
The first thing that came to mind for me is I don't want an unstable general.
No. All right, well, we can hear you fine, so we can let you proceed. But we were just afraid you're gonna freeze up, that's the thing.
Okay, understood, ma'am. So did you get all of that?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And what I'll leave you with, I'll turn it over to Ms. Fidelli to go through the up-down sheet, if that's the direction you'd like to go, ma'am.
Yes, we can do that. Obviously, your federal funds are really significant relative to your state funds. So we don't need to go line by line. If you want to point out the highlights in terms of the budget that we have here for 24, that would be a good start.
Yes, ma'am. I just two more points before I wrap up. It was during our last fiscal year, the military department employed 167 personnel, 148 received federal funding, and only 17 are 100% state funding. And during FY22, the Vermont Guard employed about 902 full-time personnel. That's federal technicians and active Guard and Reserve, and 2,915 part-time personnel. That's across the Air and Army National Guard. So it's about 147 million in federal payroll, and our total Vermont Guard spending was about 290 million in pay, operations, and maintenance of military construction. What I'd like to leave the committee with is we really need to continue our focus on growing the Guard. I'll tell you, ma'am, I could fill 500 plus vacancies right now across the Air and Army National Guard, and these are good part-time jobs for Vermonters. There are scholarship opportunities for kids. Obviously, working with the legislature, we have perhaps the best education entitlement across Guard Nation. A lot of opportunity here for folks. So I'm going to keep looking for assistance in getting the word out about the opportunities that exist in this organization. If we don't, I don't need to tell anybody. I talk about it a lot. There's a lose units. We could lose battalion guidons, and with that goes full-time jobs, part-time jobs, response capability, capacity, and again opportunities for advancement for our Guard, and a reduction in federal funding and payroll to our Guard members. So we'll be looking for help any way the legislature can help us get the word out about opportunities in the Guard. That would be much appreciated.
What has been the experience with the tuition incentive?
What makes us different?
What?
It's ma'am, this is Ken Gregg. It's been very positive. Where it's kind of hard to say exactly where it's going to go going forward. We've had, since its inception, we've had several events that have made it difficult to get an idea of how it would really work. Combination of COVID, then a couple of major deployments, which basically put 1,000+ soldiers and airmen out of the area, so they weren't utilizing the benefit. So to date, we're executing about 50-60% of what's budgeted, and we're just hopeful that it's going to continue to grow. But it's been a very positive incentive from a recruiting and a retention perspective.
Thank you. So we can keep going.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll turn it over to Ms. Fidelli.
Good afternoon. So I'll try to keep this brief. Our total general fund budget request for FY24 is $6,044,000, which is just over $400,000 increase from the prior year. In summary, our budget is, with the exception of two items, at just about a 3% increase from last year. The two items that are putting us over that 3% are personnel related. One of those items is for increases in the administration budget for a couple of exempt positions here in the Adjutant General's office. That increase was about $50,000 over a normal increase for FY24. The other increase is for two new veteran service officer positions down at the Office of Veterans Affairs. These are actually current existing positions in the military department's pool. We've been able to reallocate them to the Office of Veterans Affairs appropriation. We are just looking to fund those positions in FY24. Our total budget request for that item is just over $170,000. And I can give a brief summary of the up-down sheet if you'd like. In our admin budget, our total request is about $3 million. That is funding seven positions that are not federally funded. That includes the Adjutant General's office and myself, legal staff, administration staff. Also in this appropriation is our tuition benefit budget, which is $1.3 million this year. The other major item in this appropriation is our internal service funds. Our increase for all of our internal service funds are about $76,000 this year, so it's a pretty major increase. Those items are not allocated to our federal programs, unfortunately, so they are all housed in the admin appropriation. For the Air Guard, our next appropriation, we don't have significant increases for state funds. Many of the programs under this appropriation are 100% federally funded. There is one or two programs, maintenance and operations of facilities and an environmental program. That's a combination of federal and state funds. About 20 to 25% is state funded. In our Army appropriation and our building maintenance appropriation kind of go hand in hand. The building maintenance appropriation, which is the fourth one, provides all the state match for the Army appropriation. So for the $1.6 million in state funds that we're requesting under building maintenance, that is to provide match for the $49 million under the Army appropriation. So that includes mostly our maintenance and operations for Army facilities and grounds. That one is seeing a slightly more significant increase in operating costs. As you rise with inflation.
So overall, your net
There's appropriation. We've actually in that appropriation we have 13 full-time employees. 10 of those are funded with general funds. We were actually able to see a pretty significant decrease in personnel costs in FY24 as we had a couple of retirements by long-term employees in that appropriation this past fiscal year. So we were able to have a significant savings in personnel, which we were able to hopefully put towards those new veteran service officer positions.
Could you just clarify the two veteran service positions? Did you say they were previously funded in a different way and are being moved to general fund, or are these totally new? And there must be a reason in terms of workload or services. Could you just speak to the to those two new veteran services positions?
Yes, ma'am. So these positions, as you mentioned, they are existing positions that we did reallocate to appropriation. I believe these positions were previously federally funded positions in different appropriations. I think it might have been a firefighter position or another position that we hadn't been funded or utilized. So to make better use of that position, we reallocated it to the Veterans Affairs appropriation.
If I could, ma'am, the reason behind the two new positions, I don't know if you're aware of the recent congressional implementation of the PACT Act, which is basically is addressing all the issues and what's happened is with that, there's this whole, it's made several illnesses and service-connected illnesses. Now they're presumptive as opposed to having their source and if they should be covered. And with that, we're anticipating, from what we can see, we're anticipating somewhere around 6,500 to 7,500 Vermont veterans putting in claims for benefits. And it's that office and those service officers that do that. So we're attempting to try to have the staff to appropriately help service those claims, because it directly impacts the veteran and the state for that matter, because if the veteran gets a timely claim, they get benefits. They're not needing to seek out state services and state benefits. So it's just trying to be responsible and address up front what we know is going to be a rather significant need going forward.
Thank you. That helps explain and this would be ongoing, that these positions, that workload. Right?
Well, yes, I mean obviously, if in fact, the workload gets cleared up, we would readdress the staffing, but it'll be a while. I mean, the 4 folks that are currently there process about 1,000, 1,100 claims a year. So if you think 2 more folks picking up 500 or 600 claims, fortunately, we think it's going to be more claims processed than that, because again, the level of effort is going to be less for these PACT Act claims, because again, they don't have to try to justify the illness and everything else. It's already identified. They just basically have to, it's almost like a quick claim. They basically have to help them process the claims and get that going. So we're hoping they're going to turn around a lot more claims. But I think it's at least a 2 or 3 or 4 year effort anyways to help come out from underneath that.
Okay, that's helpful. And the net increase is 403,000. So it's a very modest increase. Other questions about the budget form, the ups and downs? Any questions in general? Or you have other information you want to share? Or have we've covered the budget, we've gone through the accomplishments and
they've got that. Do you want to talk more about that picture? You want to talk more about the picture?
We can.
Just to explain exactly what that was all about.
So, ma'am, if I could, I'll go back to that photo that you see there. And given the opportunity, we had Captain Ann Turner, who at the time of that deployment to Central Command in Southwest Asia was a company commander of Delta Company of the 572nd Brigade Engineer Battalion, and they were posted in Qatar. And their supporting battalion, the 3rd Battalion, 172nd Infantry, based here in Vermont, they were posted in Saudi Arabia. So I've noted they were at several different locations throughout the Middle East and Southwest Asia. When the withdrawal of Afghanistan started, Captain Turner was in charge of an installation that was actually being shut down. And they were told, in essence, to change their mission and prepared to process for onward movement a number of Afghan refugees. The installation that she was in charge of was not equipped to handle that. So in very short order, and under her direction and working with her higher headquarters, they, in essence, turned that installation back on again. And we're receiving, I think the final number, they processed over 8,000 Afghan refugees. I would love to get her in front of the committee, given the opportunity with your schedule. I did have her come down and speak with the caucus, the Vermont National Guard and Veterans Caucus yesterday. Her having been there is so much more impactful than me telling you that. But we had 46 members of our infantry brigade combat team from that supporting battalion at Hamid Karzai International Airport for that withdrawal. very profound experience for them, but to have them tell their story, they're far more eloquent and it's far more close than I can make it. But that's what that picture originated from. That was our last C-17 departing Afghanistan, and our soldiers were on it.
Wow. Thank you for that additional. What about what's happening in Ukraine? Has that had any impact on the Vermont Guards military?
No, ma'am. But what it does is it certainly highlights the importance of our state partnership program. We've grown the state partnership now with 88 countries and 100 partnerships, some of them being island nations, so it's a collaboration. They are across the globe. Again, we've got our 3 partnerships. A number of states have multiple partnerships. The benefit of that was seen in Ukraine. If you look at what happened in Crimea in 2014, they're partnered with California and have been since 1993. The California Guard came in. They increased the training opportunities there with a focus on that particular threat. And I think it's because of that interaction with the California National Guard, the Florida National Guard. I believe there's some other Guard states that are working now in Poland to continue training the Ukrainian armed forces. The outcome now is vastly different than it was in Crimea in 2014.
Sure is.
So we haven't provided that level of training yet, but it does exemplify that while there may be a state partnership with a given state, it is actually a partnership with Guard Nation.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? If not, we appreciate your being with us this afternoon, and I guess, General, maybe we can make connections on my other topic, connection to the museum. Really appreciate any help you can give me there. But I think your budget's pretty straightforward, and unless the committee has other questions, I'm going to then suggest that we have a next at 3. Should we just go offline for a bit? Yeah. So I'm going to recess the committee until 3:30, and thank you and for your testimony today.
Thank you, ma'am. I will send you a note shortly.